Welcome to our deep dive, you guys, into this really fascinating world of self-knowledge. We're going to be exploring David G. Meyer's book, How Do We Know Ourselves?
Mhm.
Which really tackles this age-old question
Yeah.
of, how we even perceive ourselves both individually and within society.
Yeah.
This whole deep dive is all about giving you a better grasp of yourself, your motivations, how you navigate the world.
Right.
Um,
And I think what's really cool about Myers' approach is it goes beyond just like basic introspection. He gives us a really practical roadmap to understanding like the stories we tell ourselves about who we are
right.
and like the hidden influences that shape our self-perception.
Yeah, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yeah, exactly.
So where does Myers take us in the first chapter?
Well, right off the bat, he sets the stage by highlighting the significance of self-knowledge. And he really argues that it equips us to manage our emotions effectively, make good decisions, and understand our actions, which ultimately leads to like a more authentic and harmonious life.
It's like we get a user manual for our own minds.
Exactly.
So it's not just about knowing ourselves, it's about using that knowledge to navigate life.
100%.
I love it.
And in chapter 2, he goes into the science behind self-perception. So he introduces the concept of self-schemas. And self-schemas are basically these mental templates that we construct based on our past experiences.
So we're not seeing the world through a purely objective lens,
No.
but through the filter of like our own personal history.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so, like, imagine someone whose self-schema revolves around being athletic.
Okay.
A minor sports injury to them could feel like a major setback,
Right.
while someone with a different self-schema might just shrug it off.
That's a really good example because it really shows how those self-schemas color our interpretations of events.
For sure. And speaking of interpretations, Myers also explores cognitive biases, like the self-serving bias, where we often attribute successes to our abilities, but we blame external factors for our failures.
Yeah. The classic like, I'm great, but the world is against me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is recognizing this bias can actually be empowering.
Yeah. Like how?
Well, acknowledging it allows us to take ownership of our mistakes and learn from them, which ultimately fosters personal growth.
It's not about denying our shortcomings, but it's about using them as stepping stones for self-improvement.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
And then there's also the spotlight effect, this tendency to overestimate how much other people notice us, especially when we mess up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've all had those moments, right? We trip, we say something awkward, and we feel like every single person is staring at us.
Oh, 100%. I can feel those imaginary stares burning into me. But if we know about this bias, can we actually overcome it?
Well, awareness is definitely the first step. Understanding that people aren't as focused on it as we think can help us, feel less self-conscious and navigate social situations with more confidence.
Yeah, it's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that the world doesn't revolve around us,
100%.
which can be quite liberating, honestly. So in essence, Chapter 2 reveals that our self-views are often, constructed narratives, not
Mhm.
necessarily perfect realities.
Right. And that recognition is the foundation for cultivating a deeper and more accurate understanding of ourselves.
I love it.
So, you ready to move on to chapter 3, the social self?
Yes, and this is where I have a feeling like societal pressures come into play.
Yeah, and Myers really digs into this social comparison theory, exploring how we're constantly evaluating ourselves in relation to others, which honestly can be both positive and negative.
So like on one hand, comparing ourselves to others can inspire us, right? Like to strive for improvement. But it can also trigger those feelings of inadequacy.
That is exactly it. It's a very, very delicate balancing act, and it gets even more complicated when we think about the influence of culture. Myers points out how individualistic and collectivistic cultures shape self-concept in very different ways.
Okay, I'm curious, how do these cultural differences manifest?
Well, in individualistic cultures, like here in the US, personal achievements, self-expression, those are highly valued. So individuals tend to define themselves by their unique talents, their accomplishments,
Right.
really emphasizing their individuality.
And in collectivistic cultures, like a lot of East Asian cultures, it's more about the harmony and the interdependence.
Precisely. So individuals in those cultures, they prioritize their roles within a group or family and often put those collective goals above their own personal aspirations. Like their sense of self is super intertwined with their social connections and their responsibilities.
Oh, wow. So like our cultural background shapes not only our values, but how we even perceive and define ourselves.
100%.
Wow. Okay.
And it's interesting, like, to think about how your own cultural upbringing might be influencing your values and shaping your sense of self.
Oh, this deep dive's already making me question everything I thought I knew about myself.
I know, right?
So let's move on to chapter 4, where Myers explores, this is fascinating, the realm of emotions and self-knowledge.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite chapters.
Me too.
So here, Myers argues that emotions are more than just these like fleeting feelings. They're like signals and summaries of our experiences, and they provide valuable insights into our needs and our values and even our sense of self.
So paying attention to our emotions can actually help us understand ourselves better.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's a two-way street. Our emotions shape our self-concept, and our self-concept influences how we experience and express those emotions. It's like this constant feedback loop.
Can you give me like a concrete example of how this feedback loop actually works?
Yeah. So imagine you experience the surge of pride after you accomplish something challenging.
Okay.
That positive emotion is going to reinforce your sense of self-worth and competence.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, if you're frequently grappling with feelings of shame or guilt,
Right.
it can erode your self-esteem and lead to a more negative self-perception.
It's like our emotions are a mirror, like reflecting back to our internal state, right?
Absolutely.
And influencing how we perceive ourselves.
And that's where emotional intelligence comes into play. Like individuals with high emotional intelligence tend to possess a deeper understanding of themselves.
So they're more attuned to their emotional landscape, and they can use that awareness to navigate their lives more effectively.
100%.
Okay.
They can recognize and understand and manage their emotions, which empowers them to make better decisions and cultivate healthier relationships.
Wow. Okay, so that makes me wonder, what are the practical implications of all this? How can we leverage this knowledge about emotions to, like, cultivate a more balanced and authentic self?
It's a great question, and it's one that Myers actually continues to explore throughout the book.
Okay.
But for now, I think the key takeaway is to recognize that powerful connection between our emotions and our self-concept.
So it's about becoming more mindful of those emotional responses and using them as a valuable source of information about ourselves.
For sure.
Okay. Now, speaking of memories and how they shape our sense of self, Chapter 5 takes us into this fascinating, sometimes unreliable world of autobiographical memory.
Right. And in this chapter, Myers highlights how our memories, especially those like personal narratives that we construct about our past,
Yeah.
play a central role in shaping our identity.
So the stories we tell ourselves about our past actually influence who we believe we are in the present.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Our memories aren't always as accurate or objective as we might believe.
Okay.
They're often colored by our current perspectives, our emotions, and even our desires to maintain a positive self-image.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying our cherished memories might not be entirely objective?
It's definitely a possibility.
Right.
Myers explains that our memories can be influenced by all sorts of biases, like the reminiscence bump, which basically refers to this tendency to remember more from adolescence and young adulthood than any other period.
That's interesting. And I wonder if that's why, like, those years feel so formative.
Totally.
Like, those memories are so vivid.
Because those periods are often filled with, like, significant life events and transitions, which makes them really memorable.
Yeah.
But it also means our recollection of those times might be a little idealized or distorted.
So how do we reconcile this idea that our memories are so central to our identity, but they can also be unreliable?
That is an excellent question, and one that I think leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll explore some strategies for improving self-understanding and developing a more accurate and compassionate self-perception.
I love it.
How about that?
All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll dive back in.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our exploration of self-knowledge. We've been really unpacking David G. Myers' How Do We Know Ourselves? And uncovering some fascinating insights about, self-perception, social influences, and even the role of emotions.
Yeah, it's like we're piecing together this complex puzzle.
Right.
Each chapter reveals a new facet of how we even come to understand ourselves.
Right.
And now in the second half of his book, Myers shifts our focus from, just understanding to action, giving us practical strategies for enhancing self-knowledge.
That's where it gets really interesting. He seems particularly enthusiastic about mindfulness as a tool for self-awareness.
He's spot on.
Okay.
Mindfulness, like at its core, is about cultivating this present moment awareness without judgment. Observing our thoughts and our feelings, our bodily sensations as they come up, not trying to suppress them or control them, but just acknowledging they're there.
So it's not about achieving some kind of blissful state of emptiness.
No?
It's more about developing a more like accepting observational relationship with our inner world.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And research shows that, cultivating this mindful awareness can have tons of benefits, from reducing stress, improving focus, to even enhancing emotional regulation.
How does that tie back to the idea of self-knowledge, though?
Well, when we practice mindfulness, we actually become more attuned to our habitual patterns, like of thought and behavior. We start to notice how our past experiences and our beliefs, even our core values, influence our reactions in the present moment. It's like holding up a mirror to our minds, right? And observing those often subtle processes that are at play.
So mindfulness is about developing a deeper understanding of like the why behind our actions, not just the what.
100%. And this awareness can be super empowering.
Right.
When we become more conscious of our patterns, we have more freedom to choose how we respond rather than just reacting on autopilot.
So I'm starting to see how mindfulness can be like a powerful tool for personal growth.
Yeah.
Instead of being driven by like unconscious impulses, we can be more intentional in our actions and choices.
Exactly, and that intentionality is key. It's about understanding how our minds work so we can make conscious decisions that actually align with our values and our goals.
Okay, I'm sold on mindfulness.
hmm
But what are some like practical ways that we can incorporate this into our daily lives?
Well, Myers suggests starting with short periods of meditation every day. Even 5 minutes of just like focused attention on your breath
Yeah.
can make a difference. It's just about creating that space for quiet observation.
What about those of us who have trouble like sitting still and meditating?
Oh, totally.
You know?
You can practice mindful walking, eating, even showering. The key is to just bring your full attention to the present moment, to whatever you're doing, engaging all your senses.
Okay, so it's about finding those pockets of presence throughout the day, not just like during formal meditation sessions.
Exactly. And as you become more familiar with it, you can start to apply it to, more challenging situations when
Yeah.
you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, caught up in like a spiral of negative thoughts.
Yeah, so mindfulness could be really helpful for navigating those difficult emotions we talked about earlier.
100%. Instead of trying to like suppress or ignore those uncomfortable feelings, mindfulness encourages us to acknowledge them, observe them without judgment, and let them pass.
That sounds so much healthier than the way that a lot of us are conditioned to deal with like challenging emotions.
Totally. It's a shift from resistance to acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that all emotions, even the unpleasant ones, are a natural part of the human experience.
Yeah. So mindfulness is about embracing our full emotional spectrum, not just the positive parts.
Right.
And then, using those emotions as like a source of insight.
Yeah. It's about cultivating self-acceptance, recognizing that we're whole and complete, even with our, flaws or imperfections.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is an essential foundation for genuine self-knowledge and personal growth.
Okay. Now, in addition to mindfulness, Myers also talks about introspection.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
So introspection is that process of turning our attention inward
Okay.
and examining our thoughts and feelings, motivations. It's about going deeper than just observing those internal experiences
Yeah.
and exploring those underlying causes, those patterns that shape our behavior. Like asking ourselves, why do we do the things we do?
So it's about moving beyond that surface level and gaining like a deeper understanding of the beliefs and values and past experiences that influence our present-day actions.
Exactly. Introspection can be so powerful for self-discovery, but Myers does caution against overdoing it.
Why is that? What's the downside of too much introspection?
Well, if we spend too much time, dissecting every single thought, every feeling, we could fall into this trap of like rumination and self-criticism.
Yeah?
We could get so focused on like analyzing our perceived flaws
Right.
that we get stuck in the cycle of negative thinking.
Right, like paralysis by analysis.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between introspection and self-acceptance.
Okay.
We need to examine our inner world without judgment,
Okay.
with a sense of compassion. This makes me think about journaling.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a really safe, structured way to engage in introspection without getting, lost in those spirals.
Right, because it's like a written record of our personal growth and insights, right? We can track our progress, identify recurring themes, and celebrate those breakthroughs.
Totally. You can use a journal for so many things.
Hmm.
Setting goals, clarifying your values, processing those difficult emotions, or even just capturing those moments of gratitude and joy.
Now, alongside mindfulness, introspection, and journaling, Myers also talks about the importance of seeking feedback from others.
Yes.
What role does that play in our journey of self-discovery?
Well, as much as we try to understand ourselves, we all have blind spots. There are aspects of our personality, even our behavior, that we might not be fully aware of
Yeah.
simply because we're so close to the situation.
Right.
So getting that outside perspective can help us see ourselves more clearly,
Okay.
illuminate those hidden corners of our being.
So getting those outside perspectives can help us see ourselves more clearly.
Yes, feedback from trusted friends, family members, mentors, even colleagues can offer so many insights into our strengths and weaknesses. It gives us a more complete picture of who we are.
But asking for feedback can be intimidating.
Yeah.
What if we don't like what we hear?
Yeah.
What if it challenges how we see ourselves?
Oh, totally understandable. It takes courage to open ourselves up to feedback, especially if we're afraid of judgment or criticism.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that feedback, when it's given with genuine care and respect, is a gift.
Right.
It's an opportunity for growth, self-improvement.
So how do we go about, seeking feedback in a way that feels safe and constructive?
Well, first and foremost, choose people you trust.
Right.
People who have your best interests at heart,
Right.
who will be kind and understanding.
Okay.
Then be specific about the kind of feedback you're looking for. For example, you might ask a friend, hey, what did you think about how I handled that situation? Or how do I come across in social settings?
Yeah, and it's really important to listen with an open mind,
For sure.
without getting defensive or trying to justify our actions.
Remember, the goal is to understand ourselves better,
Right.
not to prove that we're right or perfect.
It's about embracing the opportunity to learn and grow.
Exactly.
Okay, so this really highlights how self-knowledge isn't just like a solitary pursuit.
Yeah, right.
It's also about connecting with others, valuing their perspectives,
Yeah,
and recognizing that those relationships really do shape who we are.
absolutely. It's about acknowledging that we're all interconnected and our interactions with others are this rich source of insight and self-discovery.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
Well-
I'm already starting to think about how I can apply these strategies, mindfulness, introspection, journaling, and seeking feedback,
Yeah,
to cultivate a more authentic, compassionate relationship with myself.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, we'll go even deeper into self-compassion and how it can really revolutionize the way we approach self-knowledge.
I'm excited. Welcome back to our final segment, exploring David G. Myers' How Do We Know Ourselves? We've covered so much, from those self-schemas and memory biases to even mindfulness and seeking feedback. What stands out to you as the most impactful takeaway from Myers' exploration into self-knowledge?
For me, it's got to be that emphasis on self-compassion as a cornerstone of really understanding ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not just about analyzing our strengths and weaknesses, but it's about approaching ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we'd offer a good friend.
Yeah, and that makes me think about, I was really struck by how Myers connects self-compassion to resilience.
Right?
It's like when we're constantly, beating ourselves up,
Right.
we actually deplete our reserves of resilience.
Yes.
Making it even harder to bounce back from setbacks.
That's so true. Self-criticism, it just keeps us stuck in this loop of shame and doubt. But self-compassion, it gives us that space to grow, to transform.
Yeah.
It's about realizing we're all imperfect, we all make mistakes, and those mistakes aren't a sign of failure, but opportunities to learn and grow.
So instead of berating ourselves for our mistakes,
Yeah,
we can look at them with curiosity and a willingness to actually learn from them,
100%.
which is so much more empowering.
Yeah, and it aligns perfectly with that idea of, viewing life as a journey, not a destination, that Myers talks about earlier.
Yeah.
When we embrace that perspective, it just makes it so much easier to be patient with ourselves and to be compassionate along the way.
It's about releasing the pressure of having to be perfect
Yeah.
and just embracing the messy, imperfect beauty of, being human.
Yes.
But for those of us struggling with that inner critic,
Yeah.
what are some practical ways to cultivate more self-compassion?
Well, Myers has some really good suggestions. A simple practice is to just notice when you're being self-critical.
Okay.
Pay attention to how you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Is it harsh? Is it judgmental?
It's like becoming aware of that negative soundtrack that's constantly playing.
Yeah, and once you identify those thoughts, those critical thoughts, you can challenge them.
Yeah.
You know, ask yourself, would I talk to my friend this way?
Right.
And if the answer is no, why are you being so hard on yourself?
It's about replacing that inner critic with, like, a more supportive, understanding voice,
Exactly.
which I imagine can make a world of difference in how we navigate, tough times and setbacks.
100%. It's about recognizing that everyone makes mistakes. It's part of being human. And instead of seeing those mistakes as like proof that we're not good enough, we can see them as opportunities, to grow.
This makes me think about what we were discussing earlier about how memory can be unreliable. If our memories aren't always accurate, how can we even be sure that our self-criticism is based in truth?
That's such a great point. It really highlights how crucial it is to question our assumptions and work towards a more balanced and compassionate view.
This deep dive has been a journey of self-discovery, not just for our listeners, but for me personally as well. I'm really walking away with a new appreciation for the complexity of self-knowledge and, like, the power of self-compassion.
It's been awesome exploring all of this with you. And I
Yeah.
hope our listeners feel inspired to start their own journeys, armed with all the insights and strategies we've talked about.
And remember, knowing yourself is an ongoing process. Be curious, be compassionate, and most importantly, be kind to yourself.
Absolutely. Until next time, everyone, keep diving deep.